Hi, and welcome to another Mentor Match Chat. I'm Michael Dunn, and pleased today to be joined by Laura Thorne. Laura is owner of Laura Thorne Leadership Consulting, creator of the Role Model Way, and a career coach with a focus in the environmental sector. Laura, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And I'll welcome back again Dr. Martin Mendelson. Martin is Executive Vice President, Practice Growth at Spear Education, and a certified professional coach. Martin, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks again.
Glad to have you back, Martin. Welcome, Laura. So for those of you who have been following this mentor match journey over the last several months, you may recall we had our very first conversation around tips for finding a mentor. And so today I want to talk with Laura and Martin about the other end of the spectrum. So, tips, if you will, advice for being a good mentor or serving as a mentor. So, Laura, I want to kick it off with you. And, the first thing I'd like to talk about today is, as with any relationship, both sides have to exert, energy, right? So, there's, if we want a mentor-mentee relationship to be meaningful, to be successful, both the mentor and the mentee have to engage and have certain responsibilities. So, kick us off here, Laura, some of your thoughts on, the responsibilities, for lack of a better term, in that relationship of both the mentee and the mentor.
Sure, thanks. And, before I dive into that, I just want to say I think this is a great topic, and I don't think enough time is spent with mentors. I think there's a lot of people think that the mentors are just know what they're doing, or you can do it naturally, but there is an art to it like everything else, and there are responsibilities involved with it. And so a lot of the focus is on telling mentees how to find mentors, but there's not a lot of info out there. So I appreciate having this conversation and putting this out to the world. Because I've seen and experienced a lot of bad mentorship and that can really just sour the whole situation for someone in their whole future, because they'll be shy to try to get another mentor and really set them on a difficult path. So I think that, when you decide to be a mentor, or a lot of times I think you don't even decide. So, I do the Role Model Way. We're mentors every day for people who see what we're doing. But when you are in a program, or if you are officially mentoring with someone has approached you and is looking for your guidance, you are busy people usually. And it's up to the mentee to sort of foster that relationship and keep engaging with it. But if you have dedicated to being a mentor, you need to commit to that. And like I was telling you before, I was part of a program earlier this year that started January, February. And then when COVID happened, most of the mentors just bowed out. And I was really appalled, because I felt that a lot of the young women, it was a women's group, that a lot of the women in that group, this is a time when they really need help. My mentee that I stuck with, she was laid off. And I know several of the other ones were too, and had a lot of challenging things, and their mentors left them hanging. So it doesn't just affect them long-term and their ability to find another mentor, but that can really damage their ego at that point in time, wondering, what they did wrong, or just feeling like, oh, they left me, abandonment. So
yeah. So
I think really the major thing at this point to start this conversation, I'll pass it on to Martin, or back to another question.
So I think, I think you hit upon a good point there, obviously, on both sides. But if you're going to agree to serve in a mentorship capacity, especially whether it's an official program, or whether someone has come to you and said, hey, I admire what you do, or how your career has progressed, and would you act in this capacity? It's you're making a decision there to commit, so don't take it lightly. Martin, what are your thoughts on some of the responsibilities, if you will?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree with Laura more. Truly, the concept of setting boundaries right at the outset, I believe, is critical. And we need to understand, and as Laura said, usually the mentor is somebody that is of a different position, that's in a position that the mentee would like to get to. And so very oftentimes they're, quote, busier, if you'll allow me to use that term, than the mentee. And so there's responsibilities that go both ways, both for the mentor as well as the mentee. You know, if you're going to sign up to mentor someone, you better show up and you better be there. And if you can't be there, then, you know, obviously there better be a reason, but then, you know, immediately reschedule, because we do need to understand that there is a, for lack of a better way to put a hierarchy here, and you never want your mentee to start to assume things one way or the other about you because of lack of showing up. But again, that goes to the initial discussion around boundaries. What are the expectations? What do we expect out of each other? What is our communication cadence? And then that's the basis of a wonderful relationship. It's, you know, one of my mentors has said quite often that one of my mentors has often quoted the definition that a relationship is an agreement between two parties on a course of action. And so until you have that agreement of the two parties, you may run into some choppy waters because of expectations of one party or the other.
Yeah, I really love that sentiment, Martin. That resonates with me. I think as someone who is, I guess, at that midpoint in my career, I'm kind of, you know, on both sides of the seesaw. In one aspect, seeking mentorship. On the other aspect, feeling like, okay, I'm at a place in my life and career where I have something to offer. So I think the concept that you've expressed there, and it's, you know, it goes, you know, not just with mentorship, it goes in a lot of different relationships with setting expectations is critical. And I think, you know, the burden, if you will, on that often, at least in the way I view it, relies more upon the mentor, because as we've kind of said, you know, as we've been discussing, you know, the mentor may be the one who has, you know, by virtue of place and career or whatnot, more going on. And I think that person needs to say, okay, I'm going to commit to this, but this means I have X amount of time for this over Y frequency or whatever it is, right? Like, I need to set the expectation or set the boundary, as you put it, to the potential mentee to say, look, you know, we can meet for an hour every 2 weeks or whatever it is. You know, that's what I can commit to. And then I think on the flip side of that, the mentee, and we talked about this a little bit in the very first Mentor Match chat, so shameless plug, go check it out if you missed it. But, you know, if you're out there seeking a mentor, don't just go to Martin and say, hey, Martin, mentor me, and expect that Martin's going to, you know, pilot the plane, right? Go to Martin and say, this is what I see in you, and this is, you know, what I'd like to get out of the relationship, and this is what I propose, right? So that Martin has a framework to then either make that commitment, Laura, as you mentioned, or not, or, you know, within that framework say, okay, yes, I can do this, and, you know, here are those boundaries, so that you can start off on the right foot. And to Martin's point about the, you know, the definition of the relationship.
Yeah, and something you just said kind of sparked something in my brain, which is also the idea around if you're someone that has been approached as a mentor and you don't have the time, then share that with the person and do it in a way that is understandable, that is as detailed as appropriate, so that the individual doesn't walk away with their tail between their legs, feeling less than because of that. I had an experience in 2015 before I found my first coach, where I approached a pretty famous author because I loved his TED Talk, I loved his books, and I literally had the gumption, and I just emailed him and said, hey, you want to be my mentor, my coach? And I got the nicest response back, and the response was no, but it was all about, you know what, I have all this going on. If I'm going to commit to you, I'm going to take that responsibility seriously. I'm not in a place in my life right now to be able to do that. So here's a couple things I'd recommend. And I walked away from that feeling fantastic versus being ignored or just hearing no. So it, you know, even if you can't do it, there's ways to say no as well as there are ways to say yes.
Exactly. And so we're kind of segueing naturally into the next topic. We've talked a little bit about, you know, opening responsibilities of the relationship. Mentee, understand what you're asking of someone, be in the driver's seat, or I think the analogy I use is the pilot seat, to set the framework. Mentor, understand you're making a commitment, don't leave someone hanging, you know, work within the boundaries. So that's a natural segue into kind of now focus primarily on the mentor side of relationship, right? Because both of you are coaches. And I know that we've talked, Martin, in our chat previously, shameless plug again, about the differences between coaching and mentorship. But I mean, there are some similarities there. And so with both of your experiences as mentors and coaches, I want to talk a little bit about just, some of the do's and don'ts of being a mentor. You've already, Laura, you touched on it, a little bit in the beginning about making that commitment as obviously as a do. What are some other, let's focus on the do's right now. Laura, what are some other do's, if you will, of being a good mentor?
Yeah. So, and you mentioned too, I mean, be a mentor, get a mentor. Like, I think that it doesn't matter. You don't reach a point in your career ever where you don't need someone the next step above you. Even if you're going to retire, find someone who's in retirement and how to kill it at that,
Totally.
so we're not like, there's no end game here. There's not that famous author, should be striving to something greater than that and have people who've achieved beyond him, or her. And I think that, there's a presumption that you're either the mentor or the mentee, but that's not the case. Even in the individual relationships, I specifically mentor young people so I can stay fresh and young myself. I don't have kids, so I need to have young people in my life so that I don't become an old fogey at 45 years old, So, the relationships go both ways. Now, usually the mentee is there looking for guidance, for their career or starting a business or whatever it is, or leadership on a new job, but you're going to learn from them too, unless you're not open to it, which in that case, I don't think you should really put yourself in a mentor position. So that's a do. And then I think the other thing, or many other things, but another thing, as Martin was talking to, is to really, formalize again those expectations. And I think a lot of cases, if you go to like where to become a mentor, there's programs and they're going to have an agreement. I just signed up for the Virgin has a startup mentorship program, and so I just registered for that. And there's guidelines, there's forms, and I actually have this for my clients on my website. Shameless plug. If you have, or an organization who wants to start something, grab the guidelines. It's there, it's out there, and start a formal. So there's a difference between formal and organic relationships. I have had people come to me and thank me for mentoring them that I never even knew I was a mentor, and then I've had others where we have an actual agreement, and the agreement is key to really both people knowing when we're supposed to show up, how long we're supposed to show up. I learned with a high school student, time management for young people is not high up on their level of skills. So as the mentor, you have to be empathetic, I think, as well, to the position that your mentee is in. So if you're inclined to get frustrated or to punish them if they're late or miss a meeting, you have to put yourself in their shoes and say why. I had to work with my mentee on her, a planner. How do you schedule your time? And I'd have had to learn from her. I don't know how high school with A days and B days and half days and all that stuff, they couldn't even figure out where they were supposed to be when. But, it took a while, but it got to the point where it was like, okay, the first time I waited 45 minutes for her to show up just in case she was late or whatever. And then the next time was like, okay, look, if you're going to be late, I'm going to wait 10 minutes, and then if not, we'll just reschedule. And then, so that kind of stuff just really smooths the whole thing. So it's important to set those guidelines and expectations up front, like Martin was saying.
Yeah. Martin, any do's on being a mentor?
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic advice. And similar experience to Laura, as you might imagine. I learn as much from my coaching clients or mentees as I do from them as I do to try to impart knowledge to them. I think the biggest do that I could ever say to anybody, whether you're coaching or mentoring, is listen. Because yes, they're coming to you for a specific reason. Yes, in the world of mentorship, the level of specificity is in many cases higher than coaching, because they're specifically coming to you for career counseling in a specific area or how to be better at time management, et cetera, et cetera. But if we don't understand what the baseline challenges are, then there's no way we can help them. And so the concept around listening to truly find out where they are is going to help you help them, because we're all different individuals and we process things differently. We go about things differently. And the things that work for you may not necessarily work for that mentee in total, but they may very well work for them in parts. But if we haven't kind of dove in and really found out the backstory to what's really going on, that's when we get ourselves in trouble. And it's when the mentee doesn't feel heard. And when the mentee doesn't feel heard, they can shut you down. And when they shut you down, that's when you really end up with a challenge in the relationship, because you're coming at it from two different points. So I think listening is the hugest thing. Is that a word? Biggest thing. And then I would say, frankly, assuming and jumping into the advisory role too quickly would be a don't.
Yeah.
So,
and
yeah.
I think that, listening, empathy are two big things that I've heard there. And I would piggyback on and transition now to the don't. I think my do side of the coin is, realize that this is about meeting the needs of the mentee. This is not about, so here's the don't side of that coin. This is not about, oh, I get to create a mini me, right? This is not about, well, here's what you need to do, sort of thing. This is listening for understanding. And, I read an article, I think it was in Fast Company or Inc. or something recently about this topic. And, the answer can't be to pivot to be about you, right? So if the mentee is asking advice, the discussion shouldn't go back to, well, I was in a situation, here's what I did. I think it's about asking engaging questions. The person likely has may have an answer within them. It could be they're just unsure, right? So that active listening, that empathy. But I guess my major don't would be to kind of get off or continue the don't part of the discussion. This is not not about creating a mini me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least this is not, oh, here's my opportunity to make the next Michael Dunn. I mean, we only need one of those, and we have one of those right now. So that's my don't. Laura, what don'ts do you have for the discussion?
Yeah, just kind of building off of that, I think that I I did a mentor program with a place that I worked years ago, and it was a new leadership program they started, and we had to mentor with all 5 directors. And it was so interesting to see how each one of them positioned themselves. And one of them just talked about, it was me sitting and them talking. And it was like, one talked about his experiences, and he'd never worked anywhere else. His experiences for 40 years at this company, which was not going to be my path. Another one literally read like 10 things that he read online, about leadership. And so none of them really, I don't think I talked much in those situations. So I think you're dead on there. And I like to say, when we talk about the roles, mentors listen first, then ask questions, and mentees ask first and then listen.
Love that.
So,
that's fantastic.
So to that end, one of my biggest don'ts is in the very first meeting, don't start dropping your knowledge. Don't start trying to look smart. They already know that. Don't try to, prove for your worth or who you are, but get to know each other. You don't need to set any goals. So a lot of the advice I see out there is like, have a meeting. What are your goals? What do you want to accomplish? Just no, that's too much pressure. We don't even know each other. Let's just talk. Do you have kids? Do you have sisters, siblings? What's your situation? What do you like to do? Because that will make the rest of your time together so much more comfortable. And then worry about setting goals or doing something on your next meeting. So that's probably my biggest don't for setting the stage for your relationship.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's that first meeting and even subsequent meetings. I think my biggest don't is something I learned in my coaching program, which I've used, whether it's a coaching or a mentor type scenario, which is, everybody has baggage, as the phrase goes. Don't jump in their bag. And so don't get caught up in what they're telling you and using it as a reflection on your life, and then trying to reflect it back, because everybody has their own situation and their own places. And so that kind of goes to what Laura was saying about, don't just, vomit knowledge on them. That was my term, on them immediately, because you just don't know, A, where it's going to land, B, if it's going to be useful, et cetera. So 100% agree that that first encounter is really all about getting to know each other and making sure that you click, making sure that the conversation is free flowing. And sometimes we have to be a little careful of interpretation of conversations being forced, because sometimes that just has to do with relative comfort level that hasn't been established yet. But that being said, completely agree with Laura. I mean, for me, if you're going to go to the G word or goals in a first conversation, which I typically don't, it's got to be more global in nature. It's got to be more the magic wand question. Where do you see, if you had a magic wand and tomorrow you could have everything you want, what would that look like for you? And so one of the main reasons why they're there is because they don't know where to go next. So what's just bubbling up into my brain based on what Laura said is like, if they're coming to you and they don't know where to go next, why are you jumping into what's next when they don't even know what's next? That's why they're there. So I guess my don'ts are, don't jump into their bag and don't jump too quickly to the whole specificity around goals. So.
Yeah.
I think too, if I could just play off that for a second, I think that's one of the differences to me about coaching and mentoring. You might, like, if someone's paying you for coaching, we're going to jump into what their goals are they're trying to achieve. But mentoring's a different situation. You're trying to be there for someone and just guide them whatever they need. And they might not really need anything right now. They're just here to absorb. I like to tell people, as far as mentees, what not to do. Don't wait until you need a mentor. Find a mentor now. Just,
Yep.
learn from someone, start getting those skills. Someday you're going to be a mentor yourself, and you want to know how to recognize and be a good mentor. Like Michael, you guys, you'll learn to identify good mentors and bad ones, but you don't want to wait until you are in a position of dire need, because then you need a therapist. You don't need a mentor.
That's a really good point. I like the distinction there. And this, could go off on a, complete extension of an episode that Martin and I recorded a while back about the differences between mentorship and coaching. And there's nuance there, right? But I think, obviously, if if someone's paying you to coach them, their tolerance for so much getting to know you is going to be lower, obviously, than a formal or informal mentorship relationship. And Laura, you just mentioned, and I think that's a good segue into maybe the final part of this conversation. You mentioned, hey, someday the mentee, you're going to be a mentor. And so this is kind of a weird question, but I don't really know how else to phrase it. So let's, I'm sure there are people that are watching this that are like, I have a lot to give. I'd like to be a mentor, but I don't know how do I, where to start? What do I do? So, what would you guys say are, some tips or considerations for, becoming a mentor, maybe, for the first time, or at least formally for the first time, if that makes sense. Martin, you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I mean, because of what I do for a living and that I'm engaged full time with Spear, people do reach out to me both for coaching and mentorship, both within and without, or both within and from without the umbrella of Spear. And so part of it is, frankly, just putting it out into the universe and, letting people know that you're available to do that. If people bring something up, just kind of the offhanded comment relative to the subject of mentorship, et cetera. I think the other thing which I've done myself is on the non-professional areas. So Laura was talking about working with youth. So, I work with 2 different organizations as one of their formal mentors. And sometimes they have somebody for me to work with. Sometimes they don't have somebody for me to work with. And so I think it also has to do with your social media presence, frankly. Depending on what you're posting, the content of what you're posting, that kind of draws people in. And I've had that experience as well, because I tend to post more aspirational, thought-provoking type of content. Not that I'm a huge social media guy, but with what I do, that's kind of my bent. And so people tend to find you. So I don't, unless you're looking to do this as a real source of living and a means of income, For me, at least, it's more of an organic process, as well as putting yourself out there to groups that would accept mentors that mean something to you, which is kind of what I've done in my personal space. So
Nice.
yeah.
Laura, your thoughts?
I have tons of thoughts on this.
I figured Laura would actually have more thoughts on this question than me, to be
ramble
honest.
too much. Well, it just goes back to like why I think mentorship is so important right now, that I didn't have any mentors. I can't speak to anybody who was officially a mentor to me when I was younger. So I'm so grateful that we're living in a time where mentorship is much more common. Still not quite as easy to find, and people aren't stepping up to the plate to do it as much as I think they will be. But there's a lot of programs. There's a program called A Million Mentor Program, something.
Mm-hmm.
And we have awards and programs, and you can go online and find mentorships all across the country. And so really, it's my go-to answer for anyone for anything is Google. Like, where can I mentor? But also just thinking about you can mentor in your high school, you could mentor other students, you can mentor in your college, you could mentor younger kids, or you could do, like, I have a peer mentor. I think everyone should have a peer mentor. Peer mentors are amazing because you are trying to help each other reach common goals, but it's a place you can be vulnerable, especially for business owners. It's a place you can be vulnerable with someone else about what you're feeling or doing when you can't do that on social media, to tell people you're having a bad day or a client didn't work out or, something. But so peer mentorship. So that's one play I think is a great way to get experience, just giving someone else advice. And that's all you're really doing is listening and then sharing some advice. But the other thing that's happening right now is there's so much reinvigorated encouragement and need to be going back in the community and giving back. So if you're a person of privilege, which anyone sitting here watching this probably is because you have time to do it, get out in the community. There are nonprofits and places probably in the poorer sides of your community that have mentorships, just dying to have people come and join. And, I know here in Syracuse, there are many. I work with Mercy Works, which works with youth on the south side of Syracuse. I just started working with On Point for College, and they help kids get scholarships and get college programs that they want. I almost, if I could spend all of my time mentoring, I would. But I have to offset that with some coaching, which I just consider more of like paid mentoring. But I think there are lots of ways to get involved. But the first thing is really looking at yourself and seeing where you fit in. Where would you be good? What are your strengths? So evaluation of yourself, I guess, and your values. So if you can figure out what you're good at and with who, like that's why I do coaching for environmental career seekers, as my passion is the environment. And so aligning that mentorship in that space is perfect for me. So I think that's my suggestion for that would be, what are your strengths? And like Martin said, where do you find your people? And then look there.
I think those are great tips. And we're getting close to our end of our time here. So I'm going to start to wrap us up. We could obviously do, much more on this topic. But, two things that I heard there that I just want to reiterate, because I think that they're very, low-hanging fruit in terms of how to get started. I think, Martin, you touched on social media presence, and I think especially today in our socially distanced, way of living, I think if you're someone who's putting content out through various channels and you're getting reactions or comments or questions, be cognizant you may be even unbeknownst to yourself mentoring someone, right? Just through how you respond or if you respond and things like that. So I think that's a great tip. And then I really love, Laura, the concept of peer mentoring, whether it's, business owner to business owner, or whether it's, colleagues in a, large, company. I think we all know someone we work with that we could get to know better that's a peer and have that, one-on-one support for each other that is, puts you both in the mentor and mentee seat, right? So that peer mentorship is that's a really great tip. I think, if hopefully if you're watching this, you've picked up some tips. I want to throw out one last chance for any shameless plugs. Laura, you mentioned your website. What's the website address?
It's laurathorneconsulting.com. Keep
There
it
you
simple.
go. LauraThorneConsulting.com. Martin, any shameless plug you want to make here?
Well, you know, I live two lives. The majority of my life is living with spear education. So if you're a dentist and you're not engaged with us, I'd welcome you to come join us. Particularly where I live, 99% of my time is with oral surgeons, periodontists, and endodontists in something called the Master's Program to help their referral relationships grow in depth and loyalty to everybody's benefit, specifically the patients. So that's where I live most of my life. The other half of my life, from a private coaching perspective, you can go to my website, martinmendelson.com. And just another shameless plug, if I may, this coming Tuesday, I'm doing a live webcast that will be recorded with Dr. Todd Shire and Kyle Stanley on depression and suicide in dentistry. So we're taking our gloves off, we're getting real, and we're going to talk about something that not a lot of people talk about that I'm really proud of. So
excellent.
There's my plug.
There's your plug. So Martin, Laura, thank you so much for joining and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you again.
And
thank you.
Look forward to hopefully having you guys on future episodes of Mentor Match Chats. But in the meantime, have a good day, have a good weekend, or what have you, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.